word why. What a curious word. The kind of word that can make us cringe, feel defensive, or even distant. But you know, sometimes why is the key. The key that can unlock so much to our lives. Join me as we explore the why with fascinating contributors to the world. Those that entertain us, inform us, teach us about life, and if we're lucky, inspire the next in all of us. I'm your host, Dr. Rod Berger, and welcome to HeadRoom, a production of Rainlight and co-produced by Old Soul. Let's go. Man, I am a lucky guy, and I'm going to be honest, everybody. Sometimes I'm selfish. Sometimes I want to have conversations with people that I've synced up with in the past and continue to follow, and just become a fan over time of what they're doing. And most of the time, they are creative individuals that continue to push the boundaries and are not afraid of conversations that art and creativity yield. And so, with that, I'm so excited to bring back. Did an article on Rich. Gosh, it feels like a long time ago, Rich, but it's not been that long. This is Rich too. Let me give you a little background on Rich. His background is, as the young people would say, sick. I know coming from me, that does not sound terribly cool, Rich. He's first generation Filipino American and award-winning designer and artist residing in Brooklyn, New York. He's a partner and executive creative director at Sunday Afternoon. Previously, he held creative leadership roles at Jones, Knowles, Ritchie, MTV Entertainment Group, and Nike. You've received an incredible amount of awards. Your collaborators include the New York Times, The New Yorker, Mini, Nike, A24, Budweiser, Paramount, Adidas, Converse, G-Shock, American Express, NPR, North Face, Coca-Cola, Verizon, Skype, Fuse TV, Alfa Romeo, Bombay Sapphire, Hamilton the Musical, and it's like the list goes on and on and on. And he's exhibited at art galleries and festivals in New York, Los Angeles, Berlin, and Miami. And he is now, we're going to talk about this current exhibit. I believe it is going on as we speak, as we're recording, called Human Response. Rich, are you getting any sleep these days?
Oh my gosh, what a loaded question. Yeah, I'm trying to get some sleep, to be honest. A big part of me is I'm a recovering workaholic, right? Honestly, like the show was a big focus of mine, not to jump too far in, for like the past 7, 8, 9 months. It kind of started about a year ago in totality, but I really gave myself the time, energy, and headspace to really drill deep on that one. So I'm gonna take a long nap soon. I'll let you know. Keep you posted on that one, Rod.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about human response. I was thinking about you just in advance of our conversation, and I was thinking about how I'm using creativity very broadly, broad strokes here, but I'm curious as to what motivates you, sort of what turns the dial for you in a way that says, all right, this is going to be the next project, to your point, that I'm going to dedicate the next, let's say, 7, 8, 9 months to. And in that, how do you equate, in essence, what is going to be success, or what will that look like? Because I think that can, if we talk about traditional entrepreneurs, there are a lot of great ideas, but it doesn't mean we pursue them because we don't think that the market's ready. We don't think there's funding, right. a litany of reasons. But I find that artists, and maybe this is for better or worse, are a little bit different, right? It's, man, you get something that just spurs you on and you jump fully into it, regardless of whatever the outcome may or may not be, or maybe it holds you back. Tell me about your process in deciding what to pursue and not, so that you can keep being creative, keep being you.
Yeah, wow, what a great question. It's a few different things that a criteria that I put together in order to really think about what the next project's going to be, especially when I'm going to mentally, even physically devote my full self to it, right? And I spent the majority of my career being a commercial artist. I started out with a lot of personal fine art, if you will, aspirations, like I think a lot of creatives do, and I've done those things and I've exhibited a few different spaces, but I hadn't quite gone through the personal journey of it all in a few years, not since about 2012. I exhibited a series of works, or large scale drawings, in 2012. The series is called There Will Be No Survivors. They were very cheeky black and white drawings, but a bit kind of rooted in a humorous way. Not going to lie, there's humor to it. Rooted in the apocalyptic thinking of the that was surrounding the Mayan calendar of the time, right? Like kind of think 2012, like John Cusack movie, right?
Oh yeah.
So that was a bit of like a zeitgeist thing that I just wanted to tap into, using like some humorous sensibilities, and then I'd put that part of my creative approach at this scale aside, in order to, kind of go through like, that the career journey that you kind of highlighted like in the beginning. And a lot of the things that drive me in that commercial space are, like the players involved, like what the size, scale, scope, the level of risk, and even the things that what's the failure ratio? Like, is there, I enjoy going to casinos every once in a while. So I think like, what is at risk, right? That kind of gets me excited, kind of gets me up in the morning. So for the show, Human Response, that's on at 368, or it's at Dot Gallery. It's at 370 rather. Broadway in SoHo, 368. It's kind of a legacy of the space that Casey Neistat started a few years ago. So that's where it is, and they've been so gracious and welcoming me into their home, into their house, if you will, for this for their gallery space. A bit of that show, like what kind of got my energy started, was the passing of my father actually a year ago. He passed away. His 1 year anniversary is on June 26th. And he was 83 years old. He was about to be 84. And, I started utilizing AI, artificial intelligence, for those who live under rocks.
There are a few I think out there.
I'm sure there are. So I started using AI at the time as a form of mental health and therapy, just having these conversations, because they're very free form. Like text-based conversations. I'll do them on my phone. I'll do them on my laptop at like late night. And, just in order to tap into some sort of other type of broader conversation where I felt that there was something responding, if that makes any sense. I know it's like artificial intelligence, so in theory it should respond, but I wanted to feel like there was someone on the other side of this. And also tapping into the concept of a person after they've passed. Like, how do you formulate new thoughts, feelings, ideas, memories of a person, especially one that you've cared for my 42 years of life. So I started having these conversations, and like, if anyone's used ChatGPT or Jasper or whatever other prompt-based chat bot exists, especially there are a ton of them now, all those conversations are preserved and cataloged essentially within the platform. So I started seeing like, man, I got a telephone book of this, of like what was starting to amount to catharsis as well as processing my grief. And then I thought, it seemed compelling to assemble it into a narrative, and also to challenge myself at the end of the day. Like, I'm not a terribly religious person, if that makes any sense, but I grew up very religious, or within a family that was religious, like you said, first generation Filipino, and anyone that knows, especially like immigrant families, like the religion tends to be a very big part of that upbringing, and that like what holds the family unit together. So I wanted to assemble something that had a bit of those flavors to it, and also documented and cataloged my catharsis and my process, if you will. So I assembled what became about 10 and a half minutes of voiceover from a script. I just assembled a script of what these conversations were, but more of a truncated version of it. And then from that script and from that conversation, I quantified my emotional response, essentially my human response, which is a play on hashtag AI generated, right? So there's a bit of like, a lot of those creative and marketing skills I brought to the table on it. I assembled all those emotional responses into a stream of consciousness, which became about 180 words, individual words, that I assembled into a 10 and a half minute short film that's in the space. And then I extracted about 7 key words: death, genesis, warmth, renewal, dream, like words that tapped into more of a universal feeling of loss, grief, and also what that catharsis feels like. Then those words became typographic compositions that decorate the gallery space. And then they also exist as augmented reality filters, essentially living sculptures in the space. So every word, let me know if
So
I
every
lost
word is
anybody.
represented by a sculpture or some piece of art. Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Okay. So
exactly.
I think I'm
Exactly, yeah.
tracking, Rich,
And
but I
all
want to
just
go back.
3 layers of reality. Yeah.
So you went out there. So, and I'm sorry for your loss of your father. So your father passes, and you want to have, in essence, conversations that you're sort of
Yes.
putting out into the universe. Is that fair?
Yes.
So you were recording yourself or texting yourself or putting it and then taking those texts and sticking them into like a chat GPT or into an AI platform that would then respond to you?
Basically, yeah. I put my dad's obituary into
Got it.
the AI. So that became like the source of truth. Like here's what we know is true, like factually true. And then I based my conversations around that. And then I started asking AI, like, well, tell me stories about this person who you have like this limited knowledge set,
And it would
like this limited
respond
data
back with
set.
a narrative.
It would respond back with a narrative, like, tell me about my dad's life. Make my dad's story happier. Like, what does it feel like if my dad did this? What if it feel like if my dad did that? Is my dad in heaven? Is my dad in hell? Like, I would ask all these really big questions and allow myself to be vulnerable with this otherworldly force, as in AI.
So this is fascinating because and I'll get it wrong and maybe people can look it up, but I believe it's on Netflix. And I think it's a documentary called like Earth Storm or Storms. And it's like a series of like mini docs on storms that have just devastated certain parts of our planet. And there was one I can't remember if it was a tsunami or whatever in Japan, but they had put up a telephone booth where survivors or family members of those that had perished could go and pick up the phone. And this one elderly gentleman, he would go on I don't think it might have been a daily basis, and he would go in this telephone booth and basically call his wife, right? And it was this process of going and just picking up a phone that didn't have a dial tone, and in essence reenacting a conversation. So am I tracking in just sort of the experience that he was having maybe, and what that did for him, and what you were doing, obviously an updated version baked in technology with AI, but man, it screams of similarities to me.
Yeah, no, that's a great analogy. Like, yeah, definitely. Like, there's a lot of connection points there, especially I think what that person you're talking about, what they were seeking, I think is akin to what I was seeking as well.
What did you learn about yourself? I mean, I'm wondering about, I was going to ask you as you were starting, and then I thought, well, wait a minute, that's sort of going off in a different tangent, but maybe it does apply. I was wondering where sort of insecurity, how close to the surface is insecurity when it comes to the way in which you think creatively? And I can only imagine, I lost my father over a decade ago, but I can only imagine that if I'd gone through a process like that and I had sort of seeded a platform with this information tied to, let's say, the obituary, the kinds of conversations that would happen, and whether my analytical brain would say, well, that's not true, or that doesn't make sense in the response that I'm getting. Like, would I allow that to seep in? And then how would that, in essence, change the DNA, the sort of the spirituality maybe that I feel or don't feel towards that relationship, and then the resulting impact of that? Talk a little bit about sort of being vulnerable in a space, because to your point, to be an artist and to be creative, you've got to be vulnerable, I would imagine, to some extended manner, so that you can feel and relate to whatever it is you're creating. But what was the impact to you?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, I walked in the door of, like, at least the conversation door, even before I thought it was going to be a show. I didn't treat AI like it was my father, if that makes sense. I didn't say like, hey, you're my father, tell me something. It was more like, tell me about this person. So that was a bit of a rule that I put I
It was
established early. Yeah, it was exactly. It was a framework for it. in order to get, like have conversations about this person I felt tremendous like loss about. And then when I started conceptualizing it as a show, I tapped into a really good friend of mine. His name is Che Morales, and he's our curator, and he's curated for like a lot of great artists. He's worked with like individuals like Chantel Martin or Anna Park or Heather Day. He's also curated for a lot of prestigious galleries in New York City and Chelsea and SoHo. He kind of helped Sherpa me through, I think, the actual show of it all, the exhibit of it all. And he really pulled out of me the level of vulnerability. I'd stepped in from a very tactical, practical, I think the show can be this. I think it can look like this. It can be typographic and also feature these compositions. And maybe there's a technological angle to it. I was thinking about it like back in when I was at MTV or back when I was at Nike, it's like, here, it could look like this thing. I'm going to over intellectualize it. I'm going to take all my emotion out of it. Let's talk about milestones and how to get it done. Right. But then Che really pulled out the emotional core of it. It's like, you really have to tell the viewer and tell your audience, like, this is how you got here. Like, let's start with the emotional core of my dad's obituary, and that's actually displayed at the gallery. So that's kind of like part of the beginning of the linear journey, and then we kind of put up some didactic materials that allow for not just the framework of why these words resonate, and also why I thought the conversations mattered, but also the script in and of itself. In order to show with my prompts, and the prompts that he pushed me towards having using the most vulnerable prompts, like, is my dad in heaven or hell? Tell me I'm a good son. Tell me those things. So like that part was a bit new to me. It was a bit foreign and a bit uncomfortable at times, but I was so glad, because now I look at it on the walls, I look at it in space, and it doesn't feel like I own it, if that makes any sense. No, go ahead.
So if I'm with you, Rich, right? So it's obviously up now. The exhibit is up, but if I'm walking in with you, am I walking in with a son or an artist? HeadRoom is produced by Old Soul, a one-stop marketing agency that understands the power of brand and nuance. Reach out to my guy Matt at Old Soul and supercharge your brand and content strategy. That's Old Soul. Shoot Matt a note at aoldsoul.com. That's AOLDSOUL.com. And now, back to our guest.
I think you're walking in with an artist.
Really?
I think you're walking with an artist.
You have a healthy, well, not detachment, but maybe relationship to the space between you, your dad, and the art?
Yes. Now I do. Like when we were, if you saw the behind the scenes of like putting the space up, like, you probably see like all the tea and hear all the tea. Yeah. But I had a crazy cathartic moment for the opening reception. We opened up on Friday. There was a bit of a doom cloud situation that happened last Wednesday that went pretty viral. We had to move our opening reception a couple of days. But on Friday, I had the craziest cathartic emotional response to the crowd in the space, telling them the background of the space. And then I just felt such a release. And I was so grateful for it. There was a bit of that indulgence, right? The space in and of itself is indulgent, but I feel that it's not self-indulgence, more like really providing the context. And then every time I've gone in since, it feels as I'm an observer within the space in and of itself. So I really think you're walking in with an artist. I mean, I'll tell you, of course, I am my father's son and my relationship to the material, but it feels very, very healthy now.
It does feel healthy now.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think the impact is going to be on future projects? I mean, because it sounds like you had a bit of a muse in Che, right, in helping to support or to extract maybe some more vulnerable pieces from you so that maybe the authentic elements of the art could come out and be represented. Are you willing to take more risks? You talked about going to Vegas, right, and sort of playing your hand at the table, right? But that may be a little bit different in your art.
Right.
where you're being evaluated, where people are watching, they're getting sort of an inside behind the scenes look. And this is a very intimate portrayal. I would imagine you could potentially argue that it's as much about you as it is your dad, or more about you. Could be a fair either critique or observation or question walking into the human response.
Yeah. I think it's about challenging myself for sure. But I also think it's about the challenge to the creative industry as a whole. You know, what I liked about the framework of the show, where there's a film component, and also there's an augmented reality component, as well as like the physical build of the space. It forced me to pull in all of my creative disciplines into one project, right? And I'm a bit of a maniac in that way. I was like, I just want to like, well, if we just maximize this whole thing. So I mean, I look at like the impact it has on the creative industry, at least with my peers, where I I want to see them push themselves. Like I want to, selfishly put myself against them too, and see like, well, could you do something like this? And if so, how can I learn and be inspired by you, to all the other designers and artists, as well as the individuals that want to put themselves out there in that like, vulnerable, emotional way. I think also when it comes to my own work, I think the deeper effects it's going to have are pushing the tech of it all. Like I'd done augmented reality before, but very simple, like more commercial based work. This is the first time I'd really seen a convergence of technology and design, and also traditional forms of art brought together in one space, but really related to artificial intelligence in this way. And I'm sure there's going to be so much more. We are in that era of artificial intelligence. So this is probably one of the first drips in like what's going to be like a stream and eventually a waterfall. But I like the idea of time stamping this technological moment that we're in, and then seeing how that progressed. Because I want to keep going more, maybe with a different subject. But it's like bigger and scope and scale is like the ultimate goal.
That's so curious that you're willing to dive deeper, because I think the general public would think about artists that specialize in different forms of art, that in essence that's their thing. And to go beyond that, they do run the risk of not being, in essence, I guess, received well, viewed as talented in that space. It's like, if I'm in watercolors, I'm in watercolors. If I'm in sculpture, right, I'm in sculpture. If I'm in film, I'm in film. If I write, I write.
Right.
Do you think that this is indicative of a new wave of potentially the younger generation that has a better grasp on, in essence, themselves within their own space, and to include digital spaces? Because I think my generation, I'm just a tick older than you, is I don't think we kind of grew up with that individual kind of voice, right? We were sort of part of a mold. It was, you still thought about 9 to 5. You still, like, I grew up in Detroit. It was still like, do you work for a supplier to the big three? It wasn't about being an entrepreneur or going out and venturing within your own voice, for your own voice, for the purposes of creating something new and different. You're a little bit different, obviously, being an artist in that regard, but I'm just wondering if you represent sort of the minority or a growing majority of artists that are saying, it is changing, and damn, I'm excited about it, even if I might fall or fail a couple of ways, sort of towards my end goal.
I sure hope it's the latter.
You do.
Yeah, for sure. Like I kind of came up as valuing authorship or individual authorship, even when it came to a commercial space. So like there's always that level of risk, and also that personal approach. But at the same time, I've always chased my curiosity and wanting to change the format that I operated in, either by virtue of being asked and then finding something I was interested in, or just having an intentional, wanting an intentional pivot. Like even when I worked at Nike for a couple of years and started doing footwear, that was, Nike asked me if I wanted to live in Beaverton, Oregon. I was like, yeah, that's cool. And then I learned the ways of footwear design. And even when I went to MTV, I hadn't done entertainment in quite a number of years, and I hadn't really done like television, episodic television, or by virtue of that, large events like the Video Music Awards and things like that. And then that piqued my interest as well. So I've always wanted to. I like to pivot every few years and do something like large and impactful. So like this is also trying to tap into that sensibility about myself.
So do you get an itch when it comes, like, do you kind of look back and say, man, every 3 years or every 4 years, like, how does that work? And is it that you're running from something or towards something?
Oh, whoa. What? What a deep question. Damn, Rod. I didn't know we were going to go there. Oh man, I don't know. It's probably a little bit of both. I'm always trying to chase my graduate school experience. I was just talking to someone about this the other day. Like I spent 2 years at the School of Visual Arts learning from the great artist, illustrator, Marshall Arisman. And for those that don't know, he absolutely brilliant. He passed away last year. Actually, another father figure that passed away very recently. And he did the original book cover to American Psycho
Wow.
from Bret Easton Ellis. And also he did a very iconic Time magazine cover from the early 80s with Darth Vader on it. Like if anyone watched the show Freaks and Geeks, then the main character opens up his locker at the beginning of every episode. There's a Time cover with Darth Vader on it because they're all a bunch of like geeks. Like Marshall did that cover as well. His work has very emotional, kind of like Francis Bacon-esque energy. So I learned under Marshall for 2 years, as well as like a bunch of other amazing creatives, educators, and they pushed me so hard, not just in terms of process and creative approach, but also kind of showed me the ways of personal authorship that I've always seeked that type of experience, either by putting myself in a new setting, like learning from a new community, or kind of, jumping headfirst into a new project. And whether it's like, large identity, like working on the Paramount Global rebrand, like I was doing for a majority of last year, or, kind of setting up and establishing the Human Response Show.
It's so, I know this is a podcast, so people won't potentially see the video of this, but when I asked you that, if you're running from something or towards something, like the physical response you had was fantastic, and incredibly human of you as we talk about AI and technology and sort of representing our human experience. Do you think it's kind of necessary? It's like yesterday, and I'm breaking the cardinal rule of podcasting or radio where I'm time stamping, but yesterday I spent time with Bobby Bones, from American Idol, Dancing with the Stars, youngest to be inducted into the National Radio Hall of Fame. And he talked about sort of that underdog status. He's had that his whole life. He came from a very impoverished environment in Arkansas. And yet, like, I walk away from spending time with him going, he's got to have that as part of his sort of mojo. Like, if he sort of realizes the success that he's accomplished, that could potentially impact the way in which he sort of moves forward. In essence, that's what I love about the push-pull of a creative, is I can see it even just in our Zoom, Rich. It's like, you want to push the bounds, but man, you don't want to forget the past, because without that, there's a symbiotic relationship. Can you feel when that symbiotic relationship between what you want and what you've come from are either out of balance or are getting too close?
I think that, well, one, I agree. I totally agree. Like, there is that symbiotic relationship for sure. I feel like I could lose it at any moment. I don't know. Do you feel the same way? I think that, or I have like this innate fear that my creative abilities will either disappear or something will flip. So I've spent the past few years like really trying to maximize every single moment. And maybe that was a thing for my dad too, because he was an architect. So he maximized a ton. He taught me a lot about creativity. So yeah, like I'm always just trying to push. And anyone that I look up to, they've had this zone of just, creative output where there was like either a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. I think the ones that we love keep it going for as far as possible, but it's about frequency and length for me, for sure.
Can you relax? And is there a period of time where if you truly shut it down, whatever that means to you, that you start to feel uncomfortable because you feel like you might lose that edge or that creative eye?
I am the worst at taking vacations. I do not know how to take a vacation. Just for a little bit of backstory on that too. So I had a role last year at an awesome branding and identity firm. But I felt that, maybe it wasn't the best mix of parts, right? So I chose to step away after a year, and I've since found a great home at Sunday Afternoon. But I went a sabbatical, technically, quote unquote, sabbatical for 6 months. So I left in the beginning of January, but with intent, we kind of like I was also intently choreographing what my next move was going to be. I think I knew it, and a lot of people knew it. But I wasn't collecting checks for 6 months. Longest time I had been quote unquote out of work. And in that entire time, and I had the intent of traveling, going around the world, spending, time with my fiance and, kind of working on the show, which ended up being a massive undertaking, a job in and of itself. But the entire time I kept thinking, okay, what's the next thing? How am I going to keep myself busy working on this show? I was just, on the phone all the time, on the computer all the time. It's nonstop. And I genuinely wonder if that part will subside in me, like, or what is that path? Or what does that journey even look like? Yeah, for very specific story, I spent some time in Orlando with the intent of going to Disney World and Universal Studios. Right? My family used to go there all the time when I was a kid. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go to a shit ton of theme parks. I don't know if I can curse, but I'm gonna go to a bunch of theme parks. That's the way to relax. And the entire time I was still on my phone trying to put together this show. I was like, I just don't know how to chill out, dude.
It's so interesting because I think about young kids and I think about how they are so overprogrammed and scheduled. It's almost like if they don't have something in an afternoon, especially in the suburbs of America, it's like something's wrong if they don't have something planned. Yet, if I was to say, gosh, I want another generation of Rich Twos out there, right? Sort of this next gen, and you're still obviously a very young guy, it's like I want them to have some creative space and freedom of thought and time. But man, that's something in our culture, especially in America, that I don't think we celebrate in a way where we carve it out, we respect it and say, you know what, sometimes it's okay to watch paint dry, literally. It's a joke with kids when they get like, they don't have a screen. It's like, man, why don't you watch paint dry? They think it's like, no, seriously, like just relax. It's okay. In 1987, I promise you, dad wasn't on a screen.
Yeah, for sure. I now I'm a bit more conscious. Like before, like when I was a person manager, creative manager earlier in my career. I don't know how you've been, but like earlier in my career, I let my intensity affect the people around me.
Yeah.
But now I've been really good. I've tried to be good about compartmentalizing like my personal my headspace and not letting that be like, hey, just because I operate like this doesn't mean that you need to operate like this. And that's been actually very intentional for me. I think since it's like 2016, 2017, I started really, really doing that. Where it's like, hey, if I send you an email, if I send you like a Slack message at 6 a.m. or 1 a.m. or something, please ignore me until this. I have to put in parentheses, ignore this until this time. I just have to say this thing.
You know, I could go on for hours with you. I think you're terribly fascinating, very engaging, and inspirational on so many levels. I want to make sure that people can learn more about human response and sort of where they can either get sort of a taste of it, even if they can't make it to New York. Where should they go, Rich?
They can go to Dot Gallery, and it's at 370 Broadway in Soho, New York City. The last date of the exhibit is Saturday, June 24th. It is an immersive exhibit about processing grief in the era of artificial intelligence, and it features a film, physical pieces, as well as augmented reality works. So I think you can spend probably a good 30 minutes in this like, kind of small 2,000 square foot little gallery, so to speak. So yeah, like, and also one of the goals is to kind of take it around and show it around. I think it's a space that can sit within like the Brooklyn Museum, if you will. Like the build is really fantastic, and I'm not saying that because like I was a part of it, but really the team came together. There was about a small army, about 15 people that really physically contributed either their creative talents or were physically putting up walls. Like literally it's a custom build, brand new walls. There's a unique viewing box experience that's meant for like a very personal space. So yeah, I really encourage those that are in the area to check it out.
Man, keep being you, Rich. Huge fan of you and what you're doing. You inspire me.
Likewise.
And I'm super pumped for people to check out Human Response and to obviously to stay, in touch and see kind of what's on the platter for you next, because I have no doubt that there are ideas spinning around. You can check out also rich2.com, get them on social media, incredibly entertaining and informative in so many ways. Once again, I want to thank Rich2. I'm your host, Dr. Rod Berger. Thanks for taking the plunge into HeadRoom, where we uncover the why behind the what and who impacting our lives. HeadRoom is a production of Rainlight and co-produced by our friends at Old Soul. I'm your host, Dr. Rod Berger, and this is HeadRoom.